Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to this first workshop related to career progression and human resources management of the Gearing Roles project. We thank you very much for participating, and we hope that this will be a useful activity for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to provide a short introduction using a presentation. So let me see. Oops. Struggling now to find the share. Okay, share. Oops, sorry, I'm struggling a little bit to find the share page. Now it's ready.
You'll be able to see it now, Xavi, because I gave you the power.
Okay, so now.
Yeah, ready.
You are seeing my. Okay, so I'm ready. So again, welcome to this first workshop of the Gearing Roles project. Just as an introduction, Gearing Roles is a Horizon 2020 project, which is basically aimed at implementing gender equality plans in 5 research performing organizations of the consortium, as well as 1 research funding organization. This particular workshop falls within the part of the project that FECYT is running or is leading, which is related to career progression and human resources management. And the idea, what we want to do in this webinar, is to present you a common European framework for the management of human resources and research, which is the Charter and Code that I guess that most of you, if not all, are familiarized with. So we will just provide a bit of an overview with the idea, on one hand, of having a bit of a reflection, of a discussion about how the Charter and Code and the related open and transparent and merit-based recruitment toolkit could be further strengthened from the perspective of gender. And in addition, what we are going to use as a framework for this discussion is sharing good practices good practices in gender equality around recruitment and career development of researchers. For that, we are going to have 3 speakers who come from the University of Vigo in Spain, from the University of Zurich and ETH Zurich in Switzerland, and also from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. They will be sharing good practices on what is going on in their institutions, and then putting together these two parts, we hope to have a nice discussion around the Charter and Code and the open and transparent and merit-based recruitment. So with this idea, who's participating in this workshop? Right now we have around 30 participants in total. So basically a full room as we have planned it. And we of course have representatives from our Gearing Role partners. So those who will be implementing the gender equality plans in the Gearing Roles projects. We also have the pleasure of counting with the participants from other sister projects, also dealing with gender. And finally, we have a number of EURAXESS members who you probably know. I mean, EURAXESS is an initiative which is aimed at providing career development support for researchers. And one of the main, let's say, tools, or one of the main resources that it applies is precisely the Charter and Code and the promotion of the human resources strategy for researchers. So I go to the practical part first. This is supposed to be, we hope to have a bit of a discussion here, so you will all be welcome to provide input apart from the panelists, from the speakers. And there are 2 possible ways which you can use. You can use one or the other or both. You're more than welcome to use both of them. One of them is directly participating in the webinar. So you probably should be seeing a dashboard which is similar to what I'm showing you in this slide. You have the possibility of changing the language in the top menu in case you want to put it in your home language. And by default, all the participants are silenced, have their microphone silenced, so you are only in listening mode. So what we will do is at the end of each of the presentations which are planned in the agenda, we will give the floor. We will ask if there are any questions, any contributions, any comments related with the presentations. So you will have the possibility of raising your hands. You also see there in the slide where the button for raising your hands should appear. As I am the chair of the meeting, I have the possibility of seeing who's raising the hand. I will give the word to that person, open their microphone, and then you will be able to talk. In addition, we also have a number of fields which are related with for posing questions and chats. So we will be using particularly the chat. I will send you right away for your convenience. The second way that allows you to participate actively in this workshop, which is providing feedback, written feedback, through a Google form that we have prepared. The Google form is, I will just show you the, oops, sorry. I will just share this URL right away. So you're more than welcome to access while we are having this whoops, sorry. While we are having this workshop, you're more than welcome to access it and provide the feedback as needed. So this is basically the agenda. We will having a first presentation on the Charter and Code as an introduction, and as I said, then we will have the good practices from the University of Vigo, from the University of Zurich, and from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And then we will devote the final part of the workshop to have an open discussion in case there are issues that you want to raise, or comments, or if you want to share your own good practices in the line of what is discussed in this workshop. So without further delay, we pass to the first presenter, which is my colleague Izaskun Lacunza, who is the head of the unit, which is running the EURAXESS Spain BHO, which is we are the coordinators of the national network in Spain. And she will be talking about the Charter and Code and the open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment. So with that, I make you presenter.
Thank you very much, Xavi. Can you all hear me? Can you confirm, Xavi, that you are hearing me?
Yes, I hear you perfectly well.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much, all the participants and the speakers, for participating with us in this webinar. So as Xavi was saying, what I'm going to try to do in these brief slides is to introduce you, to some of you, to the Charter and Code. I am aware that most of you will be somehow familiar with it, but we wanted to give an overview of what the Charter and Code means for the EURAXESS community. And as Xavi was saying, one of our main objectives in this webinar and in some of the activities that we will be leading in the Gearing Roles project is to open up the discussion to see how this Charter and Code could be further improved in terms of gender equality and in introducing better the gender dimension that we think that may be certainly improved. So what is the Charter and Code? As I said, I guess that some of you will be really familiar, but some of you may not be so familiar with it. So the Charter and Code is a European Commission initiative, and it is basically, what the European Charter for Research is basically a set of general principles and requirements specifying the roles, responsibilities, and entitlements of researchers, as well as their employers. Whereas the code of conduct for the recruitment of researchers is a set of general principles and requirements that should be followed by employers and funders when appointing or recruiting researchers. So in a nutshell, what the Charter and Code is an initiative from the European Commission trying to establish the rights and obligations for European researchers and institutions in terms of their own bilateral relationship, let's say. So what are these principles about? These 40 principles that well, the links to the full documents are in the previous slide, so feel free to look at them if you want. But the principles, the 40 principles, are basically organized in 4 very strong pillars, which are ethical and professional aspects, recruitment and selection of researchers, working conditions and social security of researchers, and again, training and development of researchers. Needless to say that the gender dimensions of these 4 pillars are really strong. So why did the European Commission issue the Charter and Code? The main goal of the Charter and Code is to achieve a common standard for researchers throughout Europe. So what it aims at building is the European researcher identity. All researchers, all European researchers, having the same rights and obligations. So basically what it tries to set is the minimum standard that research performing institutions should be guaranteeing to their researchers. And at the end of the day, what the Charter and Code tries to do is to contribute to priority 3 of the European research area, which is an open labor market for researchers. Since we are mentioning ERA, the European research area, maybe it is important to remind what the ERA priorities are. These are the 5 priorities of the European research area. Some of them are more relevant to our workshop and some others are less, but let me read them all. So the first one would be a more effective national research systems, also transnational cooperation and competition. Number 3 would be gender equality and integrating gender dimension into research, which is of course crucial to our discussions today. The 4th one would be optimal circulation, access to and transfer to scientific knowledge. And the 5th one would be the open labor market for researchers. And this is the priority in which the Charter and Code was designed. The objective was to contribute to creating a real open labor market for researchers within Europe, avoiding or trying to eliminate all the cultural and legal barriers that would prevent the mobility of researchers throughout the European Union. The question here would be how connected these 2 priorities be. Is gender equality fitting enough into the open labor market for researchers policies? This is the question that we want to collectively discuss today and in our further activities. So how does the European Commission try to enforce the Charter and Code? As we said, the number 1, the objective, the final goal of everything I am going to explain now is that the European Commission wants more and more European institutions, both research performing organizations and research funding organizations, to be aligned with the Charter and Code. Which is the carrot? The carrot is, of course, the assumption that the better the human resources are in the institutions and the more aligned with the Charter and Code, the more attractive those institutions will be for researchers. But there is me? Yes. So I was telling you about the stick. What is the stick the European Commission has designed in order to foster the alignment of human resources policies throughout Europe with the Charter and Code? This comes in the grant agreement of Horizon Europe projects. It is in Article 32 that the European Commission is asking the beneficiaries of their projects to do to commit themselves to do the best effort to actually comply with the Charter and Code. So it is not exactly a very strong article, but already the grant agreement is asking grantees to actually align their policies with the Charter and Code. But of course, these 40 principles are quite open, and sometimes it is not so easy for institutions to actually know how to align their human resources policies towards the Charter and Code. And quite similar, I would say, to the gender equality plans, what the European Commission has done is to set up some sort of methodology, which is called the Human Resources Strategy for Researchers, in order to help these institutions to actually work towards the alignment of the Charter and Code. This methodology is basically a self-assessment and then the delivery of an action plan for the coming years, in which you actually try to come up with certain actions in order to improve your policies towards the Charter and Code. It is particularly important in this strategy what the European Commission has called the Open, Transparent, Merit-Based Recruitment Toolkit. And what is this? This is a very specific set of questions that institutions need to reflect in order to analyze and evaluate how good or bad they are actually recruiting researchers. Are they open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment enough? And we will take a look into this toolkit in the next slides, because we again think that whereas this toolkit is very important and it defines the standards for an open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment toolkit, what we believe and we want to discuss with experts is that it could have a much more strong gender dimension into these questions. Once these European institutions develop this strategy and go through this process of self-evaluation and identification of actions for the coming years in order to align better with the Charter and Code, the European Commission decides whether these institutions are entitled or not to actually be awarded with what is called the Human Resources Excellence in Research Award. This is basically an award that states that that particular institution is actually making a strong effort in actually aligning their human resources strategies towards the Charter and Code. Up to now, around 500 institutions in Europe have received this award. So as I said, these principles are up to 40 general principles for the Charter and Code. We have read them carefully, and we have identified only 3 of them that had somehow to do with gender equality. This would be the non-discrimination principle, the gender balance principle, and the selection principle that states that certain requirements should be followed in order to have a good selection process. Let's go more deeply into the open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment toolkit. As we said, this is a set of questions that the European Commission poses to the institutions in order for them to reflect how good they are recruiting their researchers. And this is important. This slide and the next coming one are important because this is basically what we want to discuss with you today. As we said, these questions are divided into 4 different sections. The first one would be the open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment system as a whole. And these questions evolve around how open the recruitment policy is, how open to the world in the sense of the language that these policies are is published is, and a number of questions that have to do with the general policy themselves. Question 8 and 9 have to do somehow, as we say, with gender equality. The first question would be, as the toolkit stands right now, is our current policy in line with policies to attract underrepresented groups, and is our current policy in line with policies to provide attractive working conditions? These are the only 2 questions that somehow have to do with gender. The next battery of questions would have to do would deal with the advertising and application phase, and questions 11 to 15 are the kind of questions that are posed to the institutions. Do we have clear guidelines or templates for advertising positions? Do we make full use of the EURAXESS platforms to ensure our research vacancies reach a wider audience? Do we make use of other job advertising tools? Again, as we said, this is a very good battery of questions in regards to the advertising and application phase, but we think that there's much work that could be done in terms of gender equality when it comes to how institutions are advertising their job openings. The next section, and I'm almost done already, apologies if I am a bit delayed. The next battery of questions of this toolkit has to do with the selection and evaluation phase. And as we know, this is a crucial element of the gender equality in recruitment. These 4 questions are the current ones that are put into the OTMR toolkit. And there's only one that has somehow to do with gender equality, which is a question about the gender balance of the selection committees. But as you can say, and just as an example, there's very little regarding training about biases in the selection processes or for the selection committees or things like that. The appointment phase has nothing, as far as we understand, has no gender dimension whatsoever. So as you see, these 23 questions are very important because they set up the common standards about how recruitment should be performed in Europe, but we wanted to discuss how to improve this in terms of gender. So as I say, now the questions, now that we have a bit of an overview, now the questions would be, could the Charter and Code better foster gender equality? And in particular, could the pillar recruitment and selection be more sensitive towards gender? So this would be basically the aim of the workshop. And Xavi, maybe you can take the lead now?
Yes, thank you very much, Izaskun.
Thank you.
Don't go away because first of all, I would like to give the opportunity to all the participants. If anybody has anything to comment or any question in regards to this first presentation, now it's the time to raise your hands and pose it. If not, I've seen that somebody has posted a question using the question menu.
Yes.
So it's a bit of an overlap here. So I'm going to advance that. It has to do a bit with the HR logo, but it also has to do a lot with gender equality plans. So anybody who wants to let's say feed into the answer of this question is more than welcome. So I'm just going to read it out loud. It's from Lydia, who works in the Politechnika Krakowska in Poland. And she says that her university has got the HR logo, I understand, but has a lot of things still to do in terms of practical actions. But the decision maker says that there is no equity problem. So she asks about how could they act to work through the resistance. So I don't know from the side of the HR logo process if you would have a question, as it's one of the things that we want to discuss. But I don't know if you have any ideas, Lydia. And as I said, if anybody else wants to contribute, now it's the time to do it by raising your hand.
So can I reply?
Yes, please.
Okay. So yes. So this strategy is kind of tricky at some points because, as Lydia very well says, the European Commission relies very much into the self-assessment of the institution because, of course, it's for their own institution to actually identify what are their challenges in terms of the Charter and Code. But precisely to avoid these kind of interpretations that sometimes are for particular individuals, let's say, what the European Commission is asking is the institution to actually go through to what they call a consultation at large of the researchers at the institution to actually identify what are the gaps in terms of the Charter and Code. So it should be expected that with this consultation at large, which is usually done through workshops or focus groups or even surveys to the whole researcher community, that gender issues and many other issues that have to do with the Charter and Code somehow arise. If it is not the case, which is it could be, of course, that these issues have not arose in the Charter and Code, my suggestion would be, Lydia, if you want to try to achieve something, is that you get in touch with the responsibles for the Charter and Code. And also, and this is why we are basically issuing these activities and this research with you, is that we have the feeling that if gender would be more visible in the Charter and Code, because it is not very visible now, if gender would be more visible, it would be more difficult for the institutions to disregard the issue. You know what I mean? This is basically what I see.
Okay. Thank you very much. Somebody else has anything to say? If not, we will continue with the following speaker. So maybe I can get back the screen. Okay. So it's my pleasure now to introduce to you Águeda Gómez, together with a colleague, a fellow researcher at the University of Vigo. Águeda is in the Equality Unit at the University of Vigo in Galicia in Spain, and she will be talking about positive actions in performance and, in performance assessment of female researchers at the university. So I will pass the presentation rights now to her. And you're ready to go.
Ya puedes. Hello, in the name to the University of Vigo, thank you very much for this invitation and for your interest in our positive action. Doris Fernandez, my colleague, will explain this positive action to you and the background information.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me properly. If not, please let us know. But so I'm sitting next to Mrs. Águeda Gómez. She's the director of the Equality Unit, and my name is Doris Fernandez. I'm a researcher at the University of Vigo, and I will be gearing the presentation. But Águeda will be with me all the time, so if there are any questions, she will be available to answer. So our idea today is to very briefly explain to you what is the proposal, which is actually a recent proposal that has been approved at the University of Vigo for positive actions in the assessment of the teaching and research staff at our university. And for that, before explaining what is the positive action, we need to explain to you a bit what was the context at the level of the country in terms of Spain, but also at the level of the university. So first of all, you have all the data in the presentation and we can make it available for you. But what is interesting to see is that there is a gender gap proven in university, at least in the Spanish context. As you can see, there is a gap that is quite evident in leadership and project leadership positions, and there is also a gender pay gap. Another interesting fact that we took into account was the fact that 98% of parental leaves are usually taken exclusively by women, whereas only 26% of shared leave, that means between the father and the mother, is only taken in 1.26% of the cases, which means that childcare usually relies fully on women still in the case of Spanish academics and researchers. Something similar happens when we talk about the leave referred to taking care of dependent people, right? So in this case, we have also more than 90% of women asking for this leave to take care of dependent people. So in this scenario, at the University of Vigo, just for you to understand, the University of Vigo is a medium-sized university. We are in the northwest of Spain, a tiny corner over here, approximately with 20,000 students. And as many European universities, we have certain goals to eliminate gender bias and gender discrimination and to promote foster equality. So these are our general measures. They refer obviously to eliminating toxic masculinity, sexism and misogyny, but as part of those objectives, we also want to foster, among other things, family reconciliation measures, which are part of the structural problem that we have identified within the careers of women in academia. So now we will move on to explaining to giving you just a couple of figures so that you can dimension what is the reality at our university. The most important figures here is that if you look at the slide where it says profesor contratado de autor, which means lecturers hired with a PhD in non-permanent positions, so less stable positions, there we have a majority of women over men. So we have more than 50% of women. But as the career progresses towards the positions of, for example, professors, what we call in Spanish catedrático de universidade, we see that the trend completely changes. And there we have the 75% of men, over 25% of women. In the next slide, we can also see this disaggregation per sex, also depending on the professional category. And we can see, again, that as we move down, which means it's not actually moving down, but as we consolidate the academic career, the presence of women decreases and decreases and decreases. And this is quite evident in the next graph, which is what we call in Spanish a scissor graph, where you can see a reverse trend in the progression of our academics. Initially, we don't have problems of equality in terms of the number of women and men at the beginning of their careers, but in the course of their academic life, as they consolidate, we can see that there happens a reverse trend. This is something that is quite in line with something that has been reported by the European Commission themselves through the She Figures report. And in fact, we started to suspect that it had a lot to do with the issue of the gender care gap. Okay, so when there is maternity or care leave, that somehow started to become evident from the data that we were gathering and crossing. So, well, you have a couple of more slides here where you can see that depending on the professional category of our staff, there is a gender gap. So here you have the figures for PhD lecturers with hired at the university. And here you have an example of the progression of the lecturers who have acknowledged terms of research. So here we start talking about scientific production and how it affects the gender gap. So, and finally, well, this is also a general graph without categories of our teaching and research staff, where we can see that we have a majority of men as women. Now, this vertical segregation is also reproduced at the level of the areas of expertise. So it becomes a horizontal segregation. And we can see that there is still a feminization of particular areas of study and a masculinization of particular areas of study. So those segregations somehow come to a point in which they interact, and they make our population, our female population, more vulnerable, as we have detected. So once we somehow had this background information that was extensively proven by scientific literature, we came to the conclusion that there is effectively a care gender gap. And as a result, somehow the harsh conclusion is that somehow maternity negatively affects the academic and scientific careers of women. This was something that also became evident from a study that was performed in Spain by a professor in sociology called Capitolina Díaz. She performed this study between 2017 and 2018, and she studied the gender pay gap in the teaching and research staff in Spain at her university in Valencia. And what she found out was that there was no gender gap when it came to people who had no children, but there was an evident gender gap when women had children with regards to men. So with all this information in mind, we carried out a diagnosis of family reconciliation needs at the University of Vigo this year. So we recently presented the results in April 2019. And this report showed that the UVigo community demands for positive actions to promote women in academia, of course, then also more specific actions such as further leave options related to family reconciliation. So not just one category, but several options that can meet the different needs. Also the consideration of the time that we devote to child or dependent care when calculating the deduction of teaching hours for researchers who have justified 6-year research periods. I don't know how it works at your research centers or universities, but in Spain we need to accredit a 6-year research period to get deduction of hours of teaching, and so this is somehow affected when you cannot produce the same amount of research while you're taking care of your children or of a dependent person. And also in UVigo funded research projects to foresee extensions in the case of maternity or family care leave. So having said this, and somehow endorsed by the extensive Spanish and Galician legislation promoting equality, we started to handle the concept of positive action. Now, what is the positive action to mitigate these consequences? So, what is a positive action? According to the Committee for Equality Between Men and Women of the Council of the European Council, a positive action is considered as a temporary strategy that allows the correction of discrimination as a result of the practices of social systems in order to develop the principle of equal opportunities. So, the main idea of this type of actions is that they're temporarily. So this means that when we achieve full equality, we won't need such measures. And we usually calculate this might happen in maybe 1 or 2 centuries, but not at the time. So they are necessary somehow. In fact, in 1984, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women of the United Nations already requested Spanish administration to implement such positive actions in the field of higher education. So now we're in 2019, a long way from then, but we are going to present to you some of the positive actions that we have decided to implement. So very recently, as I said, we approved in the 29th of April 2019 this particular action, which means that any female researcher at our university shall have the right to request the evaluation of her scientific, teaching, or transfer productivity so that it is equivalent to the average of her scientific production obtained in the 5 years prior to the following situations. And what are the situations foreseen? The first situation is the parenting of a child up to 6 years old of age. The second situation could be the direct care of a family relative who is dependent due to age, accident, or severe illness. And in the third case, the prescribed psychological treatment undergone for being a victim of gender-based violence, which, as you may already know, is a very, very worrying and concerning problem in our country. So this was the idea. The idea was to consider not only the legal maternity leave, but also the child and parenting and bringing up time of children. That's why we have it up to 6 years of age. So the thing is that we received some sort of criticism when we came up with this measure, and the criticism was that it somehow seemed that we were helping to perpetuate the feminization of care with this kind of measure. However, we had to explain that this is a mitigating temporary measure to address a verified reality, and that other measures need to be introduced, obviously, to foster gender equality in the household, and also to address other imbalances as a result. But we cannot ignore that we have a structural inequality situation that we need to address, and we cannot forget the women that are working with us now. So in this sense, there is also the possibility, as part of the positive action, to apply this measure to any member of the UVigo staff under the first two situations of taking care of a child or a care dependent, provided there is a favorable report from the equality unit. So in this case, the equality unit needs to issue a report, and if there is a positive report, you can apply to any member of the community. And additionally, of course, this measure can be extended or adapted depending on unforeseen variables that are not foreseen in the regulations of the university itself. So this is basically the recent positive action that we have approved as part of our Council of Government. And in the framework of all these positive actions, we are carrying out other equality measures, let's say, at the university that are not necessarily positive temporary actions, but that are also targeted to complement this reality. So we have, for example, just presented a chair on Feminism 4.0 to address male chauvinism in the web, so digital sexism, and our motto, let's say, is to hack cyber sexism. We also have a protocol for the change of name of trans and intersex people that was approved in 2018, and this is something that in the last year we've already received 8 requests to implement the protocol, so it's something that is actually being quite successful. We're also preparing 5 breastfeeding rooms in the 3 campuses that were actually requested by breastfeeding moms. So of course we involved the breastfeeding moms in choosing the spaces and the number of the breastfeeding rooms. We are also working on a repository of gender-sensitive teaching and research materials. And we are very, very much focused on setting up international networks for presenting proposals of European and international projects on gender issues. So we're quite interested in these gender equality plans, actions being taken by your institutions, because we are also working with areas like the Balkans and the north of Africa in trying to set up this kind of gender equality plans and gender equality units. So we're happy to collaborate in that sense too. And also, since 2018, we have a new scientific culture unit at the University of Vigo that is actually supported by the FECYT, the Spanish FECYT, part of the organization of this webinar. And we are creating gender-sensitive materials through this scientific culture unit. So this is, I think, more or less what we had to tell you today. We unfortunately cannot stay during the whole seminar for the 2 hours, but we will now show you on the screen our email. So that you have 2 emails. The first one is from Águeda Gómez, directly from the Gender Equality Unit. And if you have any questions, or if you wish to set up maybe a Skype meeting, or you wish to contact us for whatever reason, we are very, very happy to help you, to give feedback, and to share with you whatever might be of interest for your organization. So I thank you very much for your attention and time. And I think that's all from our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation, and congratulations for the mission. Not being or being quite new, let's say, to the gender world from my side, it's really, really impressive. Like with the previous presentation, you now have the opportunity of posing any kind of comment, any kind of question which is related to what has been presented by our colleagues from the University of Vigo. If not, we would continue to the okay, we have somebody who wants to contribute, Ana Belén Mil. So I will unmute you now, your microphone, and you are now welcome to speak.
Hello, I hope you can hear me well. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I wanted to ask a question about the positive action that you presented. If I understood correctly, this is also available for men at your institution.
Sí, pero siempre que pillen bajas más allá de las que le permite la ley, es decir, que las que le obliga la ley.
Okay, so I'm trying to, I will translate for you the response from Águeda.
Sorry, can you start again? I think. Can you please start again the reply, because I think there was a problem with the audio.
Okay. Can you hear us now?
Now it's working. Yes.
Now it's working. Okay. Then we will not touch the presentation just in case. But yes, the measure is available also for men, but always outside their legal recognized period of leave. So it's available if they want to request further leave, and provided that the Gender Equality Unit issues a positive report. So it's done on particular cases and at the request of the interested parties, but it is available also for men. In fact, it's something that Águeda is saying, that we want to incentivize that they actually request for this special measure, so, because that would mean that we are actually fostering also a diverse trend in the roles in the households in the case of childcare, so that we can reduce the gender care gap. I don't know if that answered your question.
Let's see. Question answered, Ana Belén?
Yeah, and yes, but no. My question was more, I think, targeted to one slide where you presented how you that women are able to ask for an assessment of their productivity, taking into account some sort of average of the past 5 years before the birth of a child, etc.
Bueno, la diapositiva en la diapositiva de sección. I'm trying to explain first to Águeda so that we can consider this properly. So, arguments que evaluamos la productividad en estos casos. Entonces, aquí sí, si eso también es aplicable para los hombres o no.
Sí. Eso que hayan pillado una baja por paternidad más allá de que obliga la ley.
Okay, yeah, so the clarification by Águeda is that they can apply, men can apply for this measure that has to do with the assessment of their scientific productivity, provided that they have taken their legal leave and they were willing also to take more than the leave that was set up by law, that is somehow, it's not compulsory, but that they're entitled to. So if they can prove that they have taken the legal leave and were willing, or actually took more than the legal leave that was established, then they can ask for the positive report from the Equality Unit, so that the assessment is also considered under special circumstances. I don't know if that has helped.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias por la presentación y por las respuestas.
Gracias a ustedes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we got one question more. I'll just mention that obviously we're running a bit late with the agenda, but I don't think it's a big issue because we're still planning. I mean, we left quite a big slot for discussion at the end of the workshop, so it really doesn't matter if we have it in advance. We will be finishing at 11:30 in any case. So next question from Bente Nol. Maybe you can introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bente, and I'm also part of one of your sister projects. I'm facilitating partner for the Chico project, which especially focuses the engineering, the STEM field. And my question is, can you please share a little bit more of your experiences when also focusing transgender and intersex people? You mentioned it in one of your slides, and maybe you could just share what are the actions or measures targeting intersex. non-binary people. Thank you.
Okay. At the moment, I don't know if we have the floor already. I guess we have. So at the moment, we are working on measures specifically targeted to transgender and intersex community within the university. But we're still researching on what is the context and what are the particular needs. What we have approved so far is this protocol for the change of name applied to transgender and intersexual people. It was approved in March 2018, but we didn't do a dissemination campaign because we were still actually working on how to handle it. And funnily enough, without the dissemination, we already got 8 requests, spontaneous requests from users that wanted to get involved in the protocol and proceed with their change of name. So you can imagine we were actually surprised that there was that amount of people that without dissemination actually got the news and decided to step in. And we are working a bit more to address the specific needs of this community. But unfortunately, we haven't developed any measures yet. We will do so shortly. Wait a minute.
Que ahora mismo hay una investigación internacional auspiciada por la Secretaría General de Igualdades del Gobierno de España, liderada por Svandis Benediktsdottir, donde se está valorando la situación de la diversidad sexual en 8 universidades españolas y portuguesas y 8 empresas, como Inditex, Telefónica, etc. Esos resultados nos pueden arrojar pistas para empezar a actuar inicialmente.
Right. So apparently there is currently a big research project being carried out at the General Secretariat for Equality. It's called the NTNU project at the level of Spain, and it's an international research involving 8 universities and companies from Spain and Portugal, big companies such as Inditex, which is the group that manages the companies Zara, for example, or Telefónica, Santander Bank, etc. And what they're doing is trying to address what is the situation of sexual diversity within universities and companies. So once we get the results, the first results from that big diagnosis, we will probably have a lot of feedback on the methodology and also on the results to be to transfer somehow that knowledge at the level of our university and carry on. So maybe you would like to research a bit on or be aware that this project admin exists, and when the conclusions are published, maybe we can talk and see if they're interested for our universities.
Okay, so we're struggling a little bit with the audio in this last exchange of questions, but I mean, you offered your email at the end, and we need to continue with the program. And you offered the possibility also of having further bilateral Skype conversations and so on. So you have the email there. Thank you very much. And if possible, we will also share the slides. And I guess that you also have to leave us. So thank you very much for your contribution, and we will keep in contact. And once again, congratulations for the measures.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will be recovering the screen now, just to introduce you to the next speaker, who's my dear EURAXESS colleague among many other things, Alexandra Zingg from ETH Zurich and from the University of Zurich, and she will be talking about gender equality and academic career development in the University of Zurich. So allow me a second to grant her presenting rights, and she should be ready to go now.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly well.
Perfect. So I will speak about gender equality in academic career development at the University of Zurich. And I will specifically speak about the University of Zurich's Gender Equality Action Plan. And the action plan is actually a measure that has been introduced due to a program that was introduced by the Swiss government. So Swiss universities is a collaboration of all Swiss institutions of higher education. And the work they are doing is based on the Federal Act on Funding and Coordination of the Swiss higher education sector. So they are a section working with federal money, and they are already running their second action plan now. So the first one was running from 2013 through 2016. And what they do is they have call openings, and all institutions of higher education can apply for money by applying with their own proposal on what kind of gender equality measures they are going to introduce over the time of the next 4 years. But the Swiss universities' money will only give half of the money of what they're planning. So it's actually matching funds. So they want you to give the commitment as an institution. And you can see that the content of the action plan of the University of Zurich is threefold, and I will mainly speak about the gender equality in academic career development, which I put in red. And the aim of this one topic is also twofold. So one aim is to increase the number of applications submitted by female junior researchers, on one side to the University of Zurich, to the internal funds, to the Swiss National Science Foundation, but also to the EU, like the European Union program, mainly Horizon 2020. The second aim is to increase the approval rates of the applications submitted by female junior researchers with University of Zurich as the host institution. And there were 4 steps planned to be taken, among others, throughout these 4 years when the project is running. And I will speak about the 2 ones that you can see in bold, namely the workshops and training sessions for female junior scientists and the awareness of implicit bias raised among decision-making bodies. So the first measure was a workshop on writing a successful ERC grant proposal. ERC being the European Research Council grant, one of the most prestigious grants given by the European Commission. And Mette Grafstad was invited. She is, she works at Yellow Research. She's actually one of the founders of Yellow Research. Those of you who are familiar with European grants probably know her. They give very professional workshops in all Europe on ERC and the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions. But the workshop was not, in that sense, an ERC grant proposal writing workshop, but it was the ERC was taken as a means to hold a career development workshop for women only, because the invitation was sent to all the female researchers at the University of Zurich. And the organizers were very surprised that only after 2 hours they had more than 70 people who registered, and they had to close the registration. But they were able, because actually they only planned to have a workshop for 20 people, so they were able to have 3 workshops to at least have a space for 60 female researchers. And what was surprising on that workshop was that about 1 to 2 hours of all 3 workshops, there was only discussion on eligibility. So how does my eligibility expand once I go on maternity, or after I had a child, when I come back and I only work part-time, does that also count as extension of my eligibility window? And these are all questions that we never hear when we have our normal trainings, because we as the grants office, we have trainings every year for the starting grant as well as for the consolidated grant of the ERC. And so one issue we almost never have female researchers registering for the workshop, and we never have discussions on this specific topic. So what was very interesting on this workshop, the way it was held by Mette, was that she used topics. For example, when you want to apply for an ERC, you have to discuss with your institute, your faculty, or your department how they're going, or if they're going to support you. or other questions that you have to discuss is, for example, how independent are you already from your supervisor? And so taking the ERC will make female researchers think about themes that they should think of, and the earlier, the better. So that was the aim of this workshop. And the workshop was organized because the whole action plan is done by the Gender Equality Office of the University of Zurich, and we are in the governing body of this. And so we were very surprised by the outcome of this workshop, or these workshops, and we thought maybe we should adapt our own dissemination strategy when we send out the information that the ERC calls are open, because we never have as many female applicants as they had for their own workshop. So what we did, we adapted the text that we send out when the call is open. So whereas for the old announcements, we used words like the ERC words like excellent PI, success career, groundbreaking, ambitious, and all these type of words, we thought, okay, let's step away from these and try to formulate it in a different way. So, for example, what we did in the new announcement, for example, we asked, are you ready to work independently and to become a research leader? I think every researcher would probably say yes to this question. And we said competitive academic track record, because it still is competitive, but we said based on your academic age, to make them aware, the ERC does take in account your academic age. And so it was very surprising that we had more than 50% of female applicants that got in contact with us. This was a huge number, and it was we were very surprised about the effect of that very simple measure. Now I will speak about the second measurement that has already been taken, namely the awareness of implicit bias raised among decision-making bodies. And the measure that was taken related to this measure was a workshop called Managing Unconscious Bias in Academic Funding Decision-Making. And it was held by a person from a business psychology consultancy, is how they call themselves, that have a focus on diversity and inclusion. And I listed you the workshop objectives. So it was basically explore or learn that you do have subconsciously, or that we all process information subconsciously, and that we understand what techniques we could use in order to mitigate these gender biases that we all have in one way or the other. But what I think was interesting in that workshop was not like the content, but I think it was a very wise decision so they made a very wise decision on the people that they invited, because they invited the vice president of the University of Zurich, but they also invited people from the Swiss National Science Foundation. So the big majority of third-party funding for all universities within Switzerland comes from the Swiss National Science Foundation. So this is much, much more than what comes from the European Commission. And they invited people from there because they make the majority of decisions on where the funding goes to what PIs. They invited us, the grants offices, and they invited people from these called NCCRs. These are National Centers of Competence and Research. These are centers that receive money from the government, but they have to build consortia of universities that are all within Switzerland. So they even invited people from other universities to come and exchange and learn about this topic. So what I would like to give you is the information on a new initiative that the university has taken, because after having a lot of measures taken for gender, they decided now that they have a more broader focus on diversity. And you can see when you look at the definition that they used, or that they basically introduced for the policy paper on diversity, gender is only one aspect of it. And the words that you see in italics are the ones they specifically want to focus on. They don't want to have a policy only, but they want to actively work on these topics. So they want people to live diversity, not only to have it on a paper and put it on their homepage. And what I think is very interesting is what they took as a basis for their definition. I think this model that you see here with the 4 layers, whereas you have internal dimensions like age or gender, race, things that, some of the things that don't change or most likely won't change throughout your life, and then you have more external or organizational dimensions, things that change very often, and it will bring you in another situation. They will like becoming a mother or becoming a father will make your life different, will change the way other people will see you or will treat you. And I think it's a very interesting way of defining diversity, and it works very well, especially for a work environment where you also go up the ladder occasionally. And so what is very important on that definition of diversity and inclusion is that the university does not only want people to acknowledge that there are differences between people, but they want people to appraise the differences, which means you not just accept that in your board of men you have one young woman joining you, but you appraise the fact that she might have a different view and brings in another perspective. And what that made, that new focus on diversity, it made the gender equality section of the University of Zurich to rebrand themselves, to rename themselves. So they are not called the gender equality section anymore, they're called gender equality and diversity. And I think what is interesting that even though gender is an aspect of diversity, they still decided to leave gender equality by itself to strengthen or to underline the fact that this is still one of the major issues that has to be solved. That was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra. Are there any comments, any questions? Okay, I see some of them here. So please don't go away, Alexandra. You'll be fine. Please, Ana Belén.
Hello, thank you very much, Alexandra, for your presentation. And I was interested in this workshop for grant proposal that you mentioned, in which the invitation was sent only to the female researchers at your university, if I understood correctly. I wanted to ask you if you met any criticism due to this measure from the side of the male researchers. And then a more technical question, who was in charge of the workshop? Who gave the workshop?
Yes, so surprisingly, we did not receive any negative comments by any male researcher. I think one of the reasons is that we, next to this training for women only, we have our general ERC training with a member of the ERC that is open for everyone. So it is an additional measure that we take. We don't say there are only training for women, but we have one that is open to everyone. And the workshop was given by Mette. You can see her name here. Mette from Yellow Research.
Perfect.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we will head to the last, but definitely not least, presentation from Svandis, and I will dare to say your last name, Benediktsdottir, who's Gender Equality Advisor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So, there you go. Ready whenever you want.
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to find the, yes, here it is. Can you see the presentation now? Or?
Yes, it's on the screen.
Okay, great. Hi everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for very interesting presentations. I hope you find some of mine interesting as well. I'm going to talk about how we have been working on this better toolkits for a gender balance at the university. As we are the biggest university in Norway, and we have the most students in technology and natural science. Yes. When I started in this work as a gender equality advisor, I said that I needed some money because money has power. So after talking about it for some years, I got an annual gender budget, which is now 563,000 euros, and women only. We have a different kind of recruitment project at all levels, and it's very important to start as early as possible. I will show you a little more about the results from all the recruitment projects. For 20 years, we have been working for more women to engineering students, and now the last years, after we had the big merge with other high schools, we have also a lot of health studies, and we are trying to recruit more men to health studies. For some years, we started with a search and find committee before announcement of positions, because we noticed that the old referent, well, somebody said that, oh, there are no women, we can't find them, they are not applying, and so on. So we said that every department have to have their own search and find committee to find women all over the world before announcement of positions. In the beginning, it was only a search committee, we said, but then they came back and said that they didn't find anyone. So we changed the name and said, now it's a search and find committee, because they are not, the management is not supposed to come back and say they didn't find any women. And actually, you can get some money from the gender budget to invite women researchers to our university. It's not a lot of money, but you can pay for the travel and the hotel and presenting, and then you can give a presentation about the faculty, the department, the city, and so on. And when we finally get, women in positions, it's in either in associate professors or full professors. And then we can offer a start packages to all newcomers in those positions at departments which have less than 25 women in associate or a full professor positions. And they decide, of course, themselves what to use the money, how they want to use the money. I will tell you a bit, and in the beginning, the gender balance budget was, all the money came from the gender balance budget. But the last 2 years, we decided that department had to finance 20% to make them more responsible for it, maybe. And we have this qualification scholarships. I'll tell you more about that. That is for associate professors. And then we have mentoring program. We have done that for many, many years. And I think actually mentoring programs and networking is two of the toolkits that actually works for women. And these are some results from the recruitment of women to technology and natural science. And we are very proud that last year we got 40% women studying cybernetics. We use about 1 million a year and do a lot of things and invite them here, pay for the hotel, pay for the travel and everything. So it's very important that we have enough students, and then we have to have them to take a PhD and so on, and finally become a professor. This is a little overview of the Search and Find Committee. I'm wondering if I'm going to change it to only be a Find Committee, because the women are there. We don't have, well, they are there. We just have to find them. So each department have to establish a committee like that and identify qualified candidates. Good time before position announced. There must be at least one woman in the search committee, and they're supposed to identify candidates from both Norway and outside Norway. And when it comes to the announcement, as already have been said, it's like the ERC grants. It's very important how we present the announcement. And I thought it was quite interesting when I started working with these issues that many women didn't know what was the criteria for full professorships. And I thought, why don't all the departments have a big posters on the wall saying this, you really need this to become a full professor. And we find it interesting that I find it interesting that women don't know about this issues, which is very important to know. And we find it important to have open announcements because when it's not open, and in some cases it might be, when it's very narrow, it might be, the reason might be that it's already decided who is going to get this job. And transparent recruitment process is, of course, very important, as we know about that have to be transparent. You have to know what is working and not working, and we are trying to give the same information to all the applicants. And then when it comes to the announcement text, we have been working on that words we are using. Who are we looking for? Are we looking for superheroes or people who have to be working all the time? Is it those women find it interesting or attractive to this to respond to these announcements? I think we often use words that are more similar to superheroes, like you have to be working all night long, and it won't be possible to have a work-life balance and have family and so on. And we also have the toolkits for better gender balance in the announcement text, so women who apply for a position know that we are working on gender equality issues. And of course, we have to introduce the country, the city, department, culture, kindergarten, and so on. And it's very important, as you all know, of course, to have a career support at the department level. Individual follow-ups. My experience is that women often don't believe themselves that they are good enough, so they might need more courage than men, and they are often more than good enough when they finally apply for a position. And it's very important for support from the leadership, and the professors could also do more for introducing women to career development. Inclusiveness is, of course, very important in decision making at the department, and participation in professional networks. And then when it comes to working environment, harassment is, of course, abuse of power, and is not tolerated. And I'm not going to talk so much about Me Too, but for the last year we have been working a lot on how to work on this Me Too issues and how to follow up and how to make it more visible on the websites and more easy to people to respond, or how we are going to work on this. It's very important. We are trying to do the best we can. Inclusiveness, networking, and mentoring is, of course, also of importance. As I said instead, we also have qualification scholarship. It's not so much money, but you can use the money to pay someone else to take the teaching, so you can concentrate on what you need in your quality assessment for a full professor. So it's only associate professors who can apply for this scholarship, and we find it it's actually working. It's very good, and we have noticed that there are some points that is more important than others, like that the department leaders must support the application, of course, and it is also more effective if the candidates assist in finding substitute teaching staff, because they usually know the best of who might be a teacher in your standing. And when they have got this scholarship, it's very important to have know how to prepare a good application for a full professorships, because in Norway you can ask for write an application for a full professorships, and you don't need an announcement. It's possible to make an application for it once in a year under, of course, an expert committee. And then it's important also to know how to write this application. And we have had some courses in that, which is very good. And here are some facts about the mentoring programs. We started with PhD candidates. The professors are both women and men. And some women want to have mentors which are women, because they think that they understand better their situation than men do. We find it very important that men also know about the situation of how to be a women scientist at our institution. And in the beginning, it was only for the PhD candidate, and then of course it's difficult to promise any positions at university. So the most important thing was that they got finished with their PhD, and then it was for postdoctors, and this year we have it for only for associate professors. And 20 pairs, and that's yes, academic year, 330 persons, and it's also that they come from different disciplines. If you are studying history or literature or languages, you have a mentor from engineering or some quite different disciplines, because they are not supposed to talk about the disciplines, it's only about the careers. So here are some feedbacks from the mentors. In general, women seem to be more likely to take jobs they do not receive qualification for. And we think that because we have had a lot of mentors, we become very good ambassadors for gender equality, and they know more about the situation. And they also said that communication, mutual expectation between supervisor and student should be discussed. And that is because many women use a lot of time as supervisors, and maybe they should discuss it more with the students. And as you see, they also said many supervisors are not educated in the guidance of a PhD. Main experience they have is from their own PhD studies. So now we have own courses for supervisors for PhD candidates. And here are some feedbacks from the mentees. It's very important to have a mentor, yes, because they are often discussing challenges at their own department, and also because it would be difficult to be a mentor from the same department because that might be a challenge for the supervisor. And the mentors give women access to hidden knowledge in academia, network meetings, highly appreciated. I have meetings with mentees once a month, and then we of course are always talking about different survival techniques or how to do things and how to communicate, how to deal with leadership, management, supervisors, and yes, so on. Many of them say that now I dare to say that they want to be a professor. Well, and here are some more information. Our gender equality and diversity plan. I didn't say so much about diversity, but in our last plan we have of course diversity, because many of the tools for better gender balances are also better tools for a better inclusiveness and diversity, is my experience. So that was it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Svandis. You presented very interesting activities. Actually, we will probably get in touch with you because we are also in charge of running a mentoring program within the project. So it's not going to be the last time you hear about us. We are running a bit out of time, so I want to make sure really quickly if somebody has a question for you. Otherwise, we will move into the general reflections that we want to ask collaboration from the participants. Apparently, there is no further questions to your presentation, so I'm going to move quickly to the last few slides that we have and try to wrap up. And as I said, ask for your collaboration probably in your desks already and on your own. So let me share my screen in a second. There we go. So as we were saying at the very beginning of the workshop, these kind of good practices that we are sharing with you from different European universities were basically meant to be an inspiration to have a joint reflection about how current guidelines about how recruitment should be from the European Commission, how we could somehow try to come up with some recommendations about how to better include the gender dimension into it. So we were discussing these 4 pillars that the recruitment has: advertisement and application phase, selection and evaluation, working conditions and social security, and career development. And we had very good examples about how every single phase can be very well improved to make sure that women apply. From the way that we write the job description, to how we select and evaluate our candidates, and how we take care about given gaps that come with maternity leaves, etc. And also from there to career development and how we can improve and mentor women in order for them to become more more self-aware about their own capabilities. So what we are asking you participants to do now, we are inviting you to go to this online form. You have it as well, the link, the specific link, you have it in the chat section of the panel. So if you open the chat, you will see the link that I am also sharing on the screen. We are asking you there a few questions about these phases. So what we want you to do is to give us ideas. It is very okay if it is raw ideas and some very, first glimpse of what you think it could be done in these different phases in order to foster the participation of women and the recruitment of women. So as I said, there is no compulsory questions, and we estimate that it will be like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of work from your side. We would invite you to do this right now, because it's now that you are, that you are more self-aware about all the implications and ideas regarding recruitment, but feel free to do it in the coming days. we really want to know about your views, because there is a very good bunch of expertise in this workshop. So the idea is to follow the form. As I said, it's very easy and there's no compulsory questions, and just let us know your ideas. What we will do, Xavi and I, what we will do is to bring this collective thinking together, and we will try to come up with a very first, let's say, 2.0 open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment toolkit with your ideas and your recommendations on board, and so we can discuss it in further activities of the project. I think this is all for now. I really want to thank your participation. I think it's been quite inspiring and interesting. There's a whole world to be done in terms of recruitment. So let's see if we can come up with something nice all together. Again, thank you very much. We will send you an email with the form again. Thank you very much. Unless you have any other question, I think that we will leave it here. Let me check and see if somebody has a question. Everything seems to be clear. So again, thanks to the participants, thanks to the speakers, and we stay in touch. Thank you very much.